Welcome to the fourth entry in my photo editing retrospective series called Then and Now. So the premise is pretty straightforward. I find a photo that I edited many years ago and return to it with a bunch of improved post-processing tools and a vastly evolved sense of style. So for this photo, we're going back 16 years to 2010 and my first visit to Seattle, Washington. One of the reasons why I love my first visits to places is that it kind of gives you permission to act like a tourist and go to all the touristy places and take all the touristy pictures, so long as you're being respectful and ethical about it, of course. So I remember being especially fond of this composition, not because it was especially unique. In fact, I'm pretty sure thousands of people have taken the same photo, but it was the first time that I took it, and seeing it with my own eyes made it seem like I was the first person to ever capture it. But of course, my editing preferences were vastly different back then, and so I'm particularly excited to revisit this photo with you now, 16 years later. All right, let's dive in. All right, so this is a photo that I want to show you. Obviously, this is already edited quite poorly, in my opinion, but if you look at the metadata, you can see the camera and the lens that I use. So this was back when I was still shooting Canon. It was my 5D Mark II with the 24-70 2.8, which is a great lens. And then, of course, here is the EXIF information. And I took this, like I said, back in November of 2010. So what are we looking at? Well, this is obviously a sculpture, and it's called Black Sun by Isamu Noguchi. And it's in Seattle, Washington. As you can see, through the hole in the sun, there is the iconic Space Needle. And the funny thing is, I always thought that the song by Soundgarden called Black Hole Sun, which is incidentally one of my favorite songs, I thought that it was inspired by this sculpture, but actually that wasn't the case. And doing my research about this sculpture, I realized, no, that actually kind of is a fallacy. So with that, what is not a fallacy is the really, really abrupt post-processing that I did to this photo. So this is a tone-mapped HDR image. I used Photomatics to tone map it, and then I applied the style that, I mean, it has a lot of the hallmarks and characteristics of poor editing. Like there's almost kind of like this weird halo-y effect here based on the editing that I applied. And overall, it's just very abrupt. It's certainly over sharp. You can almost see this halo, this change in exposure along the high contrast edge of the Black Sun sculpture. And so what I want to do, obviously, for this series is start over. I'm going to walk you through the actual photo that I took, and then we're just going to edit it. And we're going to use Lightroom, and we're going to use the tools that are available now, 16 years later. Obviously, many of them, most of them weren't available back in 2010, but also even just the core editing stack has been improved significantly from then to now. All right, so before we start editing, let's look at the original photo. Actually, let's look at the original 9 photos, because this was something that I did way more than I needed to. I used this device called a Promote Control that connected to my Canon camera, because the Canon camera, if I remember correctly, only supported 3 auto exposure brackets. And there were other cameras, I think at the time, I can't remember, it might have been Nikon actually, who they were offering more. And so this guy, I believe he was based out of Texas, developed this thing called a Promote Control, and it allows you to issue as many bracket commands as you want. So for some reason, I decided to do 9 exposures with a 1-stop increment, which is totally unnecessary. If we kind of look through these here, I'm just kind of stepping through, you can see just how ridiculous it is. In fact, the thing that I wish I realized back then was actually just how far I can push even RAW files from Canon cameras back in the day. Instead, I took all of these extra brackets, wasting tons of extra space, tone map them, basically getting minimal dividends for all of these exposures being merged together. When in reality, all I really needed to do was work on this exposure. This is probably the kind of the best exposure, the most even exposure. And there's plenty of information in the raw file to start working. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. And so let's go ahead. Before I even go to edit, I'm going to go first to crop over here. And you can see the image just looks a little bit off. Like I need to rotate it counterclockwise just a bit. I'm going to look kind of over here. This to me looks like what it should be, kind of my horizon line. So I'm going to rotate counterclockwise and stop right around, maybe right around here. I'm also looking at the Space Needle, and this looks true to vertical right now. So I'm good here. I'm happy with this. Another thing I'll do is watch if I drop out of crop, I don't like this tree over here. I could use Gen Remove to get rid of it, but instead what I'll do is go back to crop, and I'm actually going to crop from the bottom left right there. And that is good. That is taking care of our crop. Now, the first thing I'm going to do now is you can obviously see this was something that I was kind of famous for with my Canon. My sensor was notoriously dirty, and you can see things like this fiber here. Obviously, there's some spots here. And so if we go to the remove panel, this is also a relatively new tool. This was certainly not available when I was first editing this 16 years ago. And that is AI-powered auto dust removal. So I'm going to expand this over here under the distraction removal section and then click on apply. And so you can see that it does a great job of getting rid of a bunch of these dust spots. It's not perfect. Like you can see actually that it didn't get rid of that fiber there. So what I recommend doing is clicking on this visualize spots checkbox. You can also tap on the A key on your keyboard. And I like to have this threshold slider cranked up really high. And so what we are doing now is we're doing spot removal. So do not think that you can click and drag and make strokes. You have to make individual spots if you want to do the removal as part of this mode. So I'm going to make my brush size large enough to fit, for example, this thread, get rid of that. And then I'm going to drop my brush size, and then I'm going to speed through this because you can see there are a few other dust spots that are still lingering. So I'm going to select those right now. All right, so that's looking good as far as the dust spot removal. Now, the dust spot removal uses the content aware heal, which was what was available in Lightroom before we introduced Gen Remove. And so that is one method of healing or removing areas. But now I'm going to switch over to Gen Remove, which uses Firefly, because there are some kind of heavier lifts that I want to do now. So all I need to do is collapse dust here, and that puts me back in Gen Remove, because this checkbox is enabled. So what are some of the things that I want to get rid of? Well, I don't like this building over here. It's just distracting to me. And so I'm going to make a stroke here. I'm also going to get rid of this little sign right there, this lamp pole. I don't want that there. And then I'm also going to kind of speed through. There are just a few little things that I want to clean up with the sculpture itself, and just kind of other things here. So I'm going to make kind of a fast series of selections right now. All right, so these are the strokes that I've made. And so now all I need to do is click on remove. All right, so now I'm going to just look at the image here, and I'm just going to see if there's anything that jumps out. Like I'm looking over here. Let me actually turn off the overlays. Looking here where those buildings were and the lamppost, everything looks great. The sculpture looks great. Yeah, everything looks good here. So I don't need to refine anything. Now we can actually start editing. So let's go to the edit stack here. I'm going to start by clicking on auto. Kind of gives us a good starting point. I'm also going to change the profile from Adobe Color to Adobe Landscape. All right, so now that we've got this, there are a few things that I want to do. Like I'm actually going to drop the exposure a bit. I'm going to open up the black point. I'm going to restore some of those shadows. Got a bit too bright here, so something right around here looks good. Let's see the highlights. Let's actually drop those a bit more, so somewhere right around there. All right, now let's go to color. I'm going to use the dropper here and click on a gray area to get a true white balance. And so it's actually, the custom white balance is pretty true to the auto white balance from the camera, which is nice. I'm going to drop the default vibrance from auto down, and I'm going to zero out saturation too. It's getting a bit too colorful for me. All right, now trusty S curve over here. Drop our 3 pins, one here, and one here. And let's drop the point here to deepen the shadows. So something like this looks good. Let's boost the highlights, not too much. So right around there. Let's see with the midtones. So something close to center. Then, of course, let's introduce some gray into the black point by taking the black point up here and kicking it up. So something like this. And then I like to take my refine saturation slider. When you start working with the point curve here, it'll introduce a bit of a color saturation boost. I like to keep that about halfway to 50. This is not a hard and fast rule. Adjust this how you see fit. I just find that about halfway for this slider works well for me. All right, let's go down, of course, to color calibration, one of my favorite areas. If you don't see this in Lightroom, it's because it's hidden by default. So you'll click on this try dot over here, and then you'll select show color calibration. Of course, if you're using Lightroom Classic, this is at the bottom of the develop module called calibration, or I think camera calibration, one or the other. So we'll take the blue primary saturation slider and increase that. So something right around there. I'm also going to take the green primary saturation slider and increase that. All right, now that I'm looking at this photo, it's looking a bit warm. So what I'm going to do is go to temperature over here, and I'm going to cool this off a bit. It was getting a bit too warm for my taste. I don't know, something about it was throwing me off, and that's totally okay. That's important. Like, look at your photo, and if there's something that's throwing you off, obviously you need to know what it is, but then also more importantly, you need to know how to address it. So for me, I figured there are several ways that I could have done that. I could have used color grading and, added a blue tint, but I think using the temp slider here does the best job. And you can see if I toggle the mute over here, you can see how there is that kind of a warm cast to the photo. This kind of cools it off. So now we are done with most of our global edits. Now what I want to do is make some localized edits. To do that, let's go over to the masking panel over here. First thing I'll do is I want to make an edit to my sky. So I'm going to click on sky. And so you can see it did a good job of identifying the sky, but it didn't get this area here that's through the sculpture. So this is easy enough to fix. Let's go ahead and click on add, which is one of the two modifiers over here. And I'm going to use the objects mask here to add to the sky mask. And so there are two ways that you can use the object mask, either a brush or a marquee tool. I like the marquee tool, and I'm just going to make a selection like this. And here's the problem, is that this kind of object selection included the Space Needle and these trees, which I don't want. So how can we refine this? Well, we can use the object mask again, except this time, let's use subtract. I'm going to go to objects here, and I'm going to switch over to the brush. And now I'm just going to brush over here, as well as up on the Space Needle. And then voila, perfect. We now have a really nice sky mask. First thing we're going to do is rename this. I'm going to call this sky mask. And as usual, what I usually do with the sky is add some dehaze. So dehaze here, it's easy to go way too far like this. Like you pretty much ruined the sky at this point. So let's back off. I just want to bring it until I start to see a little touch of blue in the sky, because it's adding a really nice contrast to the photo. So right here looks good. But here's the thing. If I zoom in, and actually let me zoom in a bit more. So right there, you can see that we've got noise. Even though this was shot at ISO 100, also you can see that we actually have chromatic aberration. Now, admittedly, this is something that I hardly ever see anymore. And in case you're not sure what I'm talking about, let me zoom in. Do you see this blue fringe over here? Or maybe it's purple. I don't know. I can't really tell the difference between the two. It's generally a sign of lower quality optics, but that's not always the case. Still, it is most definitely here. And fortunately, it's something we can easily address. And so this is something that I think is very important to kind of keep in mind when you're editing older photos, is that older photos taken with older cameras and older lenses are subject to some of these defects over here. So let's go ahead, zoom back out. Like I mentioned, what I want to do is apply denoise. Actually, what I want to do first is go back to remove. I'm going to turn off Gen Remove here, and I'm going to get rid of that dust spot over there. There's also some dust spots over here that I want to get rid of. All right, so as doing that, you can see that we kicked off the AI Edit status button over here. Because I made changes to remove, which is upstream of masking, that invalidated the masking AI layer. So all I need to do is click on Update All. And here's the thing, I've talked about this in other videos. I'm going to talk about it here. In fact, I'm going to really kind of bring it home right now. But there is a certain order of operations if you use the AI tools in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, where if you go out of order, you totally can go out of order. No problem. But you will end up potentially invalidating some of the pixels from those edits. And you really want to keep those pixels in a valid state, which is what that update function that I just showed you does. So I will leave a link at the end of this video to that deep dive video. If you haven't watched it already, please don't skip it. Even if you have watched it, I recommend watching it again because it's got a ton of important information. I know some people get, they just get put off by, oh, I don't want to have to follow your order. I want to edit the way I want. By all means, as you can see, I'm editing the way I want to edit. But now I need to apply denoise. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Again, remember, I showed you how there's this noise over here. And so what I need to do is apply denoise. So I'm going to go to the edit stack here. Denoise is a global tool. So I'm going to go down to detail. I'm going to click on denoise. And you can see, first let's zoom in. You can see that it does a really good job of addressing the noise. And I'm actually going to increase the amount like that. That looks really good. But again, we now have invalidated certain AI tools. Which ones do we invalidate? All of them, because denoise sits at the very top of the AI edit order of operations. And so because I applied this later on, everything that sits beneath it in that order is invalidated. And what's even more important is that gen remove here, you can see new variations will be generated. And so if you remember, I got rid of the buildings over here and the lampposts and a few other things using gen remove. All of those pixels need to be regenerated in order to put this image in a valid state. So that's why I highly recommend, even if the photo doesn't necessarily need it, it's probably not a bad idea to apply denoise. That way, if you apply anything after it or anything that sits below it in the order of operations or downstream of it, you won't invalidate with denoise. So what I need to do now is click on Update All over here. And you can see that some of those pixels did actually change. And that's fine. Nothing looks especially concerning, so I don't have to worry about that. But you definitely want to pay attention to that. Now, while we're here in the global edit stack, let's go ahead and zoom over here again to see the chromatic aberration. So this is very easy to fix, fortunately. All you need to do is go to optics. There's this check box over here for remove chromatic aberration. So watch what happens. As soon as I click on it, boom, it's gone. If I turn it off, it's back. So it does a really nice job of getting rid of that chromatic aberration. All right, I'm not done with masking yet, so let's go back over here. And now I want to make some edits specifically to the black sun structure. So I'm going to click on Create Mask. Let's go ahead and select on Subject over here. So this is an adaptive subject mask, but you can see how it got the inside hole over here in the mask, which we know it's very easy to get rid of. All we need to do is go to Subtract. Let's go to Objects. This time we'll go back to the Marquee selection tool, and we'll make that same selection just like that. And boom, we cut that out. So now we only have the black sun. Let's go ahead and rename this, and we'll call this Black Sun. And so for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the exposure just a tiny bit. I'm going to add some texture, as well as some clarity, and a little bit of dehaze. Yeah, that is looking really good. Let's actually also open up the highlights and push the whites. So let's see what this does. Yeah, you see how it adds just a nice texture to the sculpture. It looks actually really nice. I'm going to open up the shadows just a bit though. There, that looks good. All right, now I want to make some edits to the rest of the image. So I'm going to go to Create New Mask, and I will select another mask that was certainly not available in 2010. And that is the landscape mask. So Lightroom will start identifying different attributes in the photo here and give me different options. So let's see, artificial ground, I want that. Water, definitely want that. Vegetation, that's a nice mask, I want that. I don't yeah, this is not a very good mask, and I already have sky, so I'm good here. Let's go ahead and click on create. These masks are already named, so that's nice and helpful. So for vegetation, I want to go ahead actually, and I want to warm the vegetation up. So I'm going to use the temperature slider here to warm that up. I'm also going to increase the saturation. And so that looks good here. Then let's go back up here to water. So for water, let's start with dehaze. I usually like to add some dehaze to the water. That looks good. Let's see what else. I'm going to actually drop the exposure just a bit there. And that's looking good. Actually, it's a bit too dark. Let's open it up right there. Let's increase the highlights. Okay, that looks good. Let's see. Yeah, that looks good. And then finally, artificial ground. That is the pavement down here. So let's drop the exposure there. But then let's also increase texture right around there and a little bit of clarity. All right. Now we are good with masks. You can see these are the effects of all the masks. I mean, masking is such a powerful thing. I absolutely love it. So let's go back to the edit stack here. Let's wrap some things up. I will increase the exposure just a bit. Yeah, that's looking good. And then let's go ahead and wrap things up, of course, with some sharpening. So as I've mentioned many times, generally what I like to do is take the radius slider, bring it down to 0.5 pixels. That kind of minimizes how far out sharpening will be applied to the high contrast edges. And then detail, I bring this out to 100 so that sharpening is applied not just to large edges, but also to fine edges. Then let's go ahead and zoom in. Actually, let's zoom into 100%. Press and hold on the Option key or Alt key while dragging on a mount. This puts the image into grayscale, makes it easier to see sharpening. So right there. And then we'll zoom back to fit. And then same thing, Option or Alt key while dragging on masking. So we can see the areas where sharpening should be removed, which is whatever turns black. So as I increase this slider head amount, you see more of the image turn black, which means that sharpening is being removed, which is good. So right around here looks good. And really that's about it. I was thinking about applying a vignette, but I don't think I need it. I think this looks good as is. And so if we hit the backslash key, this is our original photo. This is the photo that I took in 2010 in November. And this is our re-edit in 2026. Now let's go ahead and let's compare the two. So I'm going to select these two images. Let's go into compare mode here. Let's hide the film strip. And so, yeah, like, I think you'll agree that what I started with back in 2010 and what we have now, I mean, serious improvements, in my opinion. I think it's way, way more. I mean, it's obviously more natural, but it certainly has style to it. Like, it has a look to it. It's not, you know, the original unedited photo. But then when you look at what I had, this is, I mean, there's just a lot, in my opinion, that's wrong with it. And of course, that's not to imply that there aren't people out there. Anytime I do these kinds of videos, there's always at least one person in the comments who says, actually, I still prefer the original one. And that's totally, totally cool. I don't certainly want to imply that my old version is like really bad, but it's definitely not what I would do today. And that's the point, is I want to illustrate that, especially over the course of 16 years, a lot can change. And that's totally okay. Not only obviously do the tools that you have at your disposal change and improve and evolve, but so does your kind of your own aesthetic, your sense of style, what looks good to you. When I look at these two images, this just doesn't look good to me. That's not to say that it's like an objectively bad photo. There are some things, yes, there are some edits that I made that I think are objectively bad, that as a photo educator, I would steer you away from. But that's not to necessarily say that, for example, the over sharpened look, some people like that, or this kind of desaturated, I don't know, almost kind of like a cyberpunk post-apocalyptic look. People like that. I just know that today, in January of 2026, this looks a lot more appealing to me. And I think that's the whole point of this series of Then and Now. And so I hope you're enjoying this. Obviously, this is the fourth installment. I have 3 others, and I'm going to continue probably once a month, maybe, adding to this series. Now, I showed you a bunch of things about Lightroom. Obviously, this is just a small component of it. And if you want to learn everything there is to know about Lightroom desktop and mobile and web, please check out my course called Lightroom Everywhere. It's got over 12 hours of content. I will leave a link to it in the description below. I mentioned also how I have this video here on the AI edit order of operations. Please don't skip it. Or you can see what YouTube thinks you might like over here. As always, a thumbs up is greatly appreciated, as is clicking on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.